Chapter 51, Will and Abyss. Riven climbed with his body pressed against the stone. There was no path, no clear ledge. Only a slanted wall that forced him to trust the smallest projections, irregular edges that barely admitted the tips of his fingers or the partial support of a boot. Beneath him, the void opened without mercy, a long, silent drop where a fall would not mean error, but ending. The wind struck in cutting gusts. Snow had begun to fall unevenly, not in soft flakes, but in fine particles that the air hurled against rock and skin with the persistence of frozen grit. Riven moved slowly, measuring every motion, driving his bare fingers into cracks that burned like cold fire. The stones stole his heat with patient hunger. The snow burned in his hands. Each time he withdrew his fingers to search for the next hold, his skin protested, numb, clumsy for an instant. He could not afford gloves. He needed to feel the rock, to know it. A single mistake of touch would be enough for the body to lose balance and gravity to claim what was hers. He breathed with absolute control. Not fast, not deep, only enough. He advanced inch by inch, his weight distributed with surgical precision. A hold for the left hand, shift of the center of gravity, right foot searching for purchase, left foot adjusting, then again, the hands. The wind roared harder, and for a moment the wall trembled beneath his fingers. Riven stopped. He rested his forehead against the rock and closed his eyes for the span of a heartbeat. Not to rest, but to listen. The wind, the mountain, his own pulse. There were no sounds that warned of falling stone, no cracks giving way. Only the breathing of the high world, indifferent. He continued. The climb grew crueler the higher he went. In some stretches, the stone smoothed, forcing him to trust roughnesses barely perceptible to the touch. Cold was no longer discomfort. It was a constant presence, filtering into muscle, stiffening the joints, stealing precision from every movement. He did not think of the camp. He did not think of the order. He thought only of the next hold. At last, after an effort he could not have measured in time, the wall yielded. Riven found a natural shelf, an uneven ledge just wide enough to hold both feet. He pushed carefully and let himself drop onto it, first one knee, then the full weight of his body. He did not sit. He remained standing, breathing, while the wind tore what warmth remained from his wet clothes. Before him stretched a narrow path carved into the stone like an ancient scar. It rose diagonally, winding toward a higher point in the mountain. The way was passable, but it offered no shelter. Riven followed it. In some stretches, the path forced him to move sideways, the precipice always present at one side, reminding him that a misstep would not be forgiven. Snow had begun to gather in small drifts that concealed the treachery of the ground. Every step had to be tested before he committed weight. The cold bit harder. He searched for a crevice, a shelter, a place to break the wind. He found none. The path continued, merciless, until it opened into a small flat of stone, no more than a few yards across. There in the wall of rock, a dark recess offered refuge. Riven moved toward it without haste. When he was only a few paces from the opening, something changed. It was not a clear sound. It was pressure. He stopped. The wind still blew. The snow still fell. But there was a different kind of stillness there, an attention that did not belong to the mountain. Riven slid his hand to the hilt of his sword and turned his body slightly, never offering his back to the path. Then he saw them. Two eyes shone from within the recess. They did not reflect light. They absorbed it. Riven drew his sword slowly. He stepped back once, then again, never taking his gaze from the darkness. The eyes moved, came closer, and then the creature stepped into the light. It was a mountain lion, massive, dark-furred, almost black, made for rock and night. Its muscles flowed beneath the hide with unnatural ease, and its long, curved fangs jutted from its jaws like hooked blades, made not merely to kill, but to tear. It did not roar. It advanced, step by step, sure of itself, master of the terrain. Riven kept retreating, aware of every inch that separated him from the edge of the path. The lion lowered its head, shoulders tightening, body gathering for the leap. There was no room to maneuver, no place to evade. Riven felt the stone end beneath his heel. The lion sprang. There was no time to think. Riven lifted his sword by pure reflex as the beast's weight crashed into him. The impact carried them both off the path. The world turned. Sky and stone exchanged places. They fell. The wind became a continuous scream as the precipice swallowed them. Snow mixed with darkness. The mountain closed over them. And then, silence. The abyss swallowed them without haste. They moved together on the rope like a single awkward, vulnerable creature. Dren at the front and Luthera close against his side. The bluish mist faded behind them as they walked, though it did not vanish all at once. It thinned like a bad dream, reluctant to release the mind. At times it curled again around their boots in soft eddies. At others it disappeared entirely, leaving only the strange light of crystals scattered through walls and ceilings. Alden had stopped trying to measure time. There were no dawns, no nights, only the rhythm of restrained footsteps, careful breathing, and the persistent sound of water that, somewhere nearby, fell or ran over stone. The first sign came as a murmur, a heavier dripping, more constant, slowly becoming a continuous susurrus. When the corridor behind them opened, the group stopped almost at the same moment, without needing a signal. Before them stretched something different, a transition marked by water. Small waterfalls fell from cracks in the ceiling, forming silver threads that vanished into dark pools. Narrow streams wound between rocks covered in pale moss. In some places, water gathered in deep basins, so still they looked like black mirrors. Here the crystal light, more scattered, reflected on the surface in bluish flashes that rippled like scales. The rope pulled slightly as the last of them reached the front. Leanna drew a deep breath. The air smelled different here, less of enclosed stone and more of living damp, wet minerals, something ancient breathing beneath the water. "This," Doran murmured. "Now this is an interesting place." Dren raised a hand, not to silence them. They had already grown used to silence, but to ask for attention. "I think we can dispense with this now," he said, touching the rope at his waist. Alden looked around. The hallucinatory mist was behind them. The crystal light was different here, not seductive, but cold, functional. Even so, the abyss remained the abyss. There were no guarantees. Dren read the doubt before Alden could voice it. "If something like before catches us again, the rope helps," he said. "But here the danger is different, and walking tied together could kill us if we need to react quickly." Alden answered with a single inclination of his head. "All right, but keep the discipline of silence." One by one, they untied themselves. The sound of knots sliding was minimal, almost non-existent, yet Alden still felt the instinctive reflex to tense, as if any scrape might summon Murkhaz from afar. When the rope was coiled again, Dren stowed it in his bag. They moved on. The path led them along a natural ledge beside a wall of stone. To the right, water ran through irregular channels, descending in small steps toward a broader lake. To the left, the rock rose, streaked with scattered crystals that still cast enough light to show the way. They advanced in single file, though no longer because of the rope, but out of caution. Alden walked near the center, measuring distances, watching Kale from the corner of his eye. The young man was still pale, but his step was sure. Even so, the way he avoided certain turns of the torso betrayed that the wound was no memory, but a constant presence. Leanna moved beside Dren. She waited several minutes before speaking. She chose a moment when the sound of water formed a safe roof over her voice. "Why did the mist not affect you as much?" she asked at last, so softly it was nearly a murmur. Dren did not turn at first. He kept walking, gaze fixed ahead. "It affected me," he answered. "I simply recognized it." Leanna frowned. "You recognized the voices?" Dren paused only slightly, one of those pauses that do not stop the body, but do interrupt thought. "I recognized the poison," he said. "It was not the first time." Leanna waited. She did not press, but her silence itself was a question. Dren let out a brief breath. "In the past, I was exposed to drugs, many of them. Some meant to break you, others to shape you, others only to see how long it took before you began to beg. Liana tensed. Training? Dren turned his head just enough for her to see he was not jesting. I was raised by a guild of assassins. The water kept running, the crystals kept shining, but the air seemed to grow colder around those words. Liana said nothing for a moment. You were a child, she murmured at last. Dren did not answer immediately. His eyes remained ahead on the narrow path, as if there were something easier to look at there than memory. My youth was hard, he said, and merciless. There was no compassion, no choice. They break you, and then they teach you how to use the pieces. He paused again. I take no pride in it. Liana swallowed. And the visions? She asked. You too? Dren nodded once. Yes. He said no more. But Liana saw it in the edge of his jaw, in the tightness of his neck. The restraint was not calm, it was discipline. Probably with memories worse than your, he added, and there was no boasting in his voice, only fact. Liana lowered her gaze. I am sorry, she whispered. Dren neither accepted nor rejected the sympathy. He simply kept walking. At least it was useful for something this time, he said. They went on a little farther, then Luthera stopped. It was a sudden animal halt, instinctive. Her ears flattened and her whole body drew taut like a bowstring. Dren raised a hand. The group froze. Alden felt a change in the air, a faint shiver as though the water itself had checked its course. What? Doran began. The lake to their right stirred, not as it would if a stone had fallen, as if something enormous were moving beneath it. And for an instant, Alden thought there was more than one thing under there. A dark mass rose and then another, and then the head lifted above the surface. It was a giant sea serpent, but its skull was no serpent's skull. It carried draconic features, a long jaw, bony plates around the muzzle, and two cold eyes that caught the crystal light as if devouring it. Water streamed from its neck in rivulets, and the body still submerged made the surface tremble with a slow, heavy motion. Back, Doran growled. There was no time. The creature expelled a jet of water under pressure. It was no simple torrent. It struck like a solid blow, a liquid lash that ripped fragments of stone from the ledge. The impact would have hurled anyone into the lake or against the wall. Kel reacted on reflex. He raised the small round shield Alden had given him and set it between the jet and Liana, who stood too near the edge. The water slammed into the metal with violence, and the sound rang out like a hammer blow in a closed chamber. Kale staggered one step back, teeth clenched, his arm trembling under the force, but the shield held. The deflection saved Liana from taking the blast full on. Liana fell backward, gasping. Alden was already moving, Arundel in his right hand, the short sword with the wolf-headed hilt in his left. He advanced carefully along the ledge, waiting for the exact instant when the creature came too close. The serpent lunged, jaws opening to bite. Alden crossed both blades. The impact was brutal. This was not soft flesh. The fangs were like hooked knives and the muzzle was shielded in hard plates. Even so, Alden managed to turn the bite just enough to keep it from taking his arm. The force ran through his shoulders and made his teeth grind. Water sprayed in all directions. Sarah did not hesitate. An arrow flew from her bow, swift and true, and buried itself in one of the creature's eyes. The monster convulsed, releasing a wet bellow that rolled through the cavern. The next jet came out wild, striking the rock wall and breaking into a rain of freezing spray and fragments. Now! Doran roared. The dwarf came forward with Grumar's axe raised high. He sought no elegance. He sought an ending. The blade fell with a force that seemed to tear loose a piece of the world. The serpent's head parted from its neck with a hideous crack and dropped into the lake, sinking in a dark whirlpool. The body thrashed, hammered the surface, sent waves crashing against the ledge. And then it too sank, leaving behind water that slowly closed again, as if nothing had happened. For a heartbeat, silence returned. Alden drew one breath, recovering his balance. Is everyone? He began. He never finished. The lake stirred again, this time closer. A second head emerged with an even swifter motion, as though it had been waiting just below, learning from the first attack. Water slid down its bony plates, and its eyes, smaller, fiercer, fixed on them without blinking. And at the same time from the corridor they had come through, a cluster of shadows appeared. Krogars, not many, but enough. 3, perhaps 4, moving low and fast, using the edge of the ledge as if they were part of the rock itself. "The Krogars!" Alden shouted. Then Luthera threw herself into the fight. She did not attack head-on. She slipped low between Kale's legs and the edge of the path, almost invisible against the wet stone. One Krogar turned too late to see her. The wolf sprang and drove it down with the force of her body, sending it tumbling against the wall. Her fangs snapped into its side with a dry crack, and she wrenched her head savagely before letting it drop. The Krogar fell and did not rise again. At once, Luthera turned, growling, placing herself between the group and the darkness from which more shadows might come. Kel moved between the Krogars and Lyanna without thinking, shield on his left arm, sword in his right. The first Krogar went straight for Cal's throat. Cal raised the shield and the impact landed with a dull thud. Claws scraped across the metal with a shriek. Cal turned his forearm, threw the creature off to one side and answered with a quick cut that opened its flank. The Krogar fell writhing. Lyanna, with the sword Alden had forged for her, did not hold back. She did not loose a great gust, not in a place like that, with water and stone so close, but she used the wind with precision, short, controlled pushes that unbalanced the Krogars just before Kyle or she herself met them with the blade. "To your left," Kale whispered, and Lyanna turned in time to catch a slash, the steel shivering in her hand. Meanwhile, Dren slid toward the serpent. He did not meet it head-on. He came at an angle, using the narrow ledge as if it were an advantage. His daggers flashed with speed, cutting again and again into softer places. Between the plates, at the base of the neck, where the water made the blades slick but also hid the blood. The serpent unleashed another jet. Dren dropped at once, and the water passed overhead to smash against the wall. The freezing spray soaked him, but did not slow him. He drove forward again, attacking without giving the monster a fixed center. The creature grew enraged. It turned toward Dren, jaws opening to seize him from the side, and that instant was all Alden needed. Arundel, as if answering the urgency, began to give off a reddish-gold light, faint at first like embers beneath ash. Alden did not summon anything. He asked for nothing. He only moved. 2 strides. A planted foot, a cut. The blade traced a clean arc. The serpent's head parted from its neck and fell into the lake with a heavy splash. The body convulsed, struck the water, drenched the ledge, and sank like the first. Dren stepped back, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling for the first time in plain sight. Kyle and Lyanna finished the last Krogar almost at the same instant. Kyle caught it with the shield, and Lyanna drove through it with a dry, unadorned thrust. The creature dropped and lay still. Alden looked around. The ledge was wet. Water ran in little streams back toward the lake. Blood on the stone was already thinning and washing away. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Doran nodded, wiping the axe against the rock as though the motion restored calm. Sarah retrieved her arrow from the eye of the first serpent, her face composed, as if fear had never touched her. Lyanna was breathing fast but remained standing. Kale gripped his left arm, the same one that had taken the force of the water jet. The shield still held, though the metal bore a dark mark where the blow had struck. "I am fine," Kale murmured, without looking at anyone. Alden was about to answer when he heard it, a blow, deep, dull, distant at first, like an echo returning too late. Alden did not need to hear the second to know what it was, but it came anyway. Murkhaz's tail struck the stone again. Alden's skin tightened beneath the armor. Luthera lifted her head and gave a low growl, almost inaudible, but full of warning, her amber eyes fixed on the darkness of the corridor, as if she could see through it. Doran clenched his jaw. "We must keep moving," he said. It was not a suggestion. It was survival. Alden nodded once. "We move. Now." They did not run. Running was noise. Noise was death. They resumed their march along the ledge, leaving behind the lake, the sunken serpents, and the false feeling of victory. The water kept flowing, indifferent. The crystals kept lighting the path, cold and constant. Behind them, somewhere in the dark immensity, the tail struck stone again. As though the abyss meant to remind them of something they still wanted to forget. that every victory down there was only a loan.